The online debate about our town of Dunleary is a bit like a walk on a blustery spring day along our famous pier. The dialogue starts positive enough. Dunleary, great for a walk, finished with an ice cream, yum. But then somebody chips in, oh, the small businesses are really struggling there. Somebody else contributes, yeah, so many empty premises, it's a disaster. The final comment is often along the lines, like so many towns, digital has destroyed the town. Well, I'm here today to challenge that narrative. Towns are not in terminal decline, but they do need to adjust and reassess their direction. A bit like myself in some ways, I remember when I was 9 years old, not being able to read or write. My mother brought me to see a child psychologist. During the session, he asked me, Eoin, please draw something. With a pen I picked up and drew a picture with my left hand. He then asked me, Eoin, will you throw this dart at that dartboard? With my right hand, I threw a dart, which didn't hit bullseye, but it did land on the dartboard. I remember him saying, interesting. Another hour of assessments and tests went on. As we drove home that evening, my mother turned to me and said, that man said that if I can help you to read and write, you'll probably get a first in Trinity. That seemed a long way off at my point, where to me the most simple words were incomprehensible. Where my classmates could see meaning, I could just see a jumble of letters. I remember the following evening, my mother putting her hand on my shoulder and saying, Eoin, what are you struggling with? And I pointed to the word. She sat down and said, well, let's see if we can work this out together. Let's break the word out into separate bits and see, can we do it broken up that way? I said, okay. So she wrote, and I said, now, Eoin, can you read this? All to get her. And that simple approach was my Rosetta Stone moment, because suddenly, in a jumble of long words, I could see meaning by breaking what seemed incomprehensible down into simpler words and then recombining them. And I still get goosebumps on the back of my neck, remembering that moment of insight and clarity. I suppose that was my mother's approach. She was great at persevering. She often said to me, keep going, Eoin, as I struggled with my homework, keep going, you will get there. And that was her approach to business. She was a great small business owner. Her best business was probably the hand knit business, where she had dozens of people knitting from home, creating fashions in Aran jumpers for sale to the German market. And we were sometimes unwilling participants in the photo shoots for each season's stock in our back garden, sometimes on very cold wintry days. When I look back, I think I was very lucky in the sense that both my parents were great small business owners. My father's first business was a small retail jeweller's shop. Costello Jewellers was the business's name. And his philosophy of life was very simple. Do what you can with what you've got. And by using that simple approach, he grew it from one location up to 3 locations. And I had joined him the summer after I graduated from Trinity to help him with that. So yes, the first part of that prediction of that child psychologist had come true. I suppose what happened then as we worked together, myself and my dad was a traditionalist. So I could see that to scale the business beyond the 3 locations, we need to have electronic point of sales. We needed to have stock control systems on computers. We needed to have websites promoting our different locations. But my father, being a traditionalist, he felt that, look, the best way to run a business is keep it all on scraps of paper and keep the most important business information in your head. And it kind of came to a head after a number of years of us debating whether we should go the technology route or continue with this traditional route. And it came to a head one evening where I said, look, Dad, if we can't go down the digital route, I'm really going to have to go my own way. And he thought about it for a moment, or probably 2 minutes, and turned to me and said, well, son, the best of luck with your new direction. So that was my introduction to setting up a digital company then, which I then, in the front bedroom of my house, set up Novara Technology. And within 6 months, my partner turned to me and she said, look, either the business is going to move out or I'm going to move out. because we'd grown up to 4 staff. We had probably within 6 months 1,000 customers, and the business was going very fast. She couldn't get into the bathroom. She couldn't get near the coffee machine because the techies were constantly on it. So needless to say, the business moved out. We grew up to around 20 staff to be Ireland's second largest hosting company before I successfully sold it. I then went on to run Ireland's largest incubation centre for one of the large institutes of technology, dealing with 50 to 60 digital and tech startups each year. And I also do digital marketing and social media training for small businesses. I think the guiding principle would be my father's basic mantra: do what you can with what you've got. That would be the advice that I was distilling to the next generation digital entrepreneurs and small businesses. So what's this all got to do with our big idea? Well, someone once asked me, what's the collective name for a group of small businesses? I said, I don't know, a gaggle, a flock? And she said, no, a town. So what are we doing in our town that we believe is part of a big idea that can help change the towns around the country and internationally for the better? So working closely with our partners, Bank of Ireland and Dunleary at Down County Council, we established Digital HQ. And basically what Digital HQ does, it has a 3-pronged approach to town centre regeneration. Firstly, we took empty space above the bank branch, which they were no longer using, and converted it into what we call Dunleary Enterprise Centre. So there we have 8 businesses attracted into the town, located in that space, which generate 45 jobs locally. And those people are going, buying their lunches locally, getting the dry cleaning done locally, buying their gifts locally. So it's a very positive impact in what was formerly an empty space. But then we also try and encourage other people who own similarly empty space to convert those into co-working spaces. So we set up an initiative called Digital Dunleary. And what Digital Dunleary does is it tries to encourage landlords to convert empty space from retail into vibrant co-working spaces. We also provide training in digital marketing for local small businesses through the Digital Dunleary initiative to try and help them get rid of the fear factor in respect of going online and trying to attract more customers digitally. And the final element of our Digital HQ initiative is we use the town's website to bring the story of the local small business community to a much wider audience. So we call this our Love Dunleary campaigns. And so far we've run 7 campaigns to date, focused on different sectors like coffee shops, interior design, food. And we try and tell the story of the local business owner, the personal story, in a feature piece. We then put that out over our social media networks, and that helps bring their story to a much wider audience, but also generates clicks to their online presence and ordering process. So where's the bigger picture with all this? Well, an American thought leader called Bruce Katz came up with this concept of new localism. And basically it boils down to that the real power to change lies locally in communities where people live and work. It sounds an awful lot like my dad's approach, do what you can with what you've got. So what we're saying to people is, in this era where COVID-19 has forced us all to focus on different ways of doing things, to focus on your local community. So how can you practically do that today? So take out your smartphone. Give your local favorite small business a positive Google review. Or better again, cancel that order you've placed with a global e-commerce provider and see can you source that locally online. If you're sick of working from home or the commute into an office block, why not take a hot desk in one of your local co-working facilities? Because there are a number in most towns. If you run or own a digital or tech business, why don't you consider moving from the city centres and the congestion that would normally you'd encounter and move to your local town? Invariably, staff find that they are much happier in the welcoming arms of a local community than in a soulless out-of-town office park. And then finally, what we would say to landlords is reassess your approach to your empty premises. Be open to embracing change and help repurpose our high street. We at Digital HQ believe that within 10 years, co-working spaces will be the second highest use of space on high streets in towns across the country. So being open to change and reassessing direction at this key time is really important. In fact, I myself have had to go through a period of reassessment. When my mother passed away, I was going through her papers about a year ago, tidying them up. And I came across a letter from her motor neuron disease consultant. And as I read it, under background medical history, the first sentence said, her eldest son has Asperger's syndrome. And I turned to my sister, who was with me at the time doing this tidy up, and I said, Orla, look at this. Surely they're talking about her brother here. There must be some mistake. And she looked at it and said, no, it seems quite clear. The eldest son has Asperger's syndrome. And it turned out that my mother had kept something from me from that meeting with the child psychologist. Not only had he made that prediction about getting a first in Trinity, which I had, in fact, gone on to get a first in Trinity, but he also had diagnosed that I had Asperger's syndrome. And my mother had decided that in the times that we're in, back in the 70s and 80s, Ireland as a monoculture, monotheistic society probably wasn't very tolerant of people who were different. And she decided to keep that from me. And I have to say, in retrospect, I'm glad I didn't grow up having that label. But I'm now coming to a much greater acceptance of myself. I have my possible weak points. I could never understand why my dad couldn't see the rationale of wanting to go for digital and for tech. I can't sometimes understand small business owners. Clearly, to me, it's rational that the how computers can do such a better job, eliminate waste, reduce time, etc. But my approach hadn't always taken account of the human element, the people's concern for their jobs, people's concern for uncertainty. So that's something I've come to much more to terms with. But also my condition had given me great strength. So when people said to me, you can't set up a tech company in the front bedroom of your house, you don't know anything about it. I said, well, why not? And I grew Nuvara Technology up to 20 staff, Ireland's second largest hosting company, before I sold it. When I was head of Startup Ireland, people said to me, you can't run Ireland's National Startup Week with no budget and no team. And I said, well, why not? And we then went on to deliver the Startup Gathering, which saw 420 events take place in 22 counties with audiences totaling 19,000 people. So when people say to me, you can't reinvent a town, I say, well, if you have the basic ingredients of small businesses who care, empty premises that could be repurposed, but most importantly, a community willing to change and adapt and get behind its local community, then I believe you can do it all together.